Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy's daily newspaper analysis. Today is 20th January 2026 and today we have some very important topics for our analysis, and this PDF of this discussion is available in the comment section and you can also access it as well. Right, so let's move on to the topics. So there are some important topics. The first one is Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets with UAE President, and in fact in this meeting 200 billion trade on the table. Because UAE is one of the largest trading partners for India, the objective of this visit is to further increase and enhance bilateral trade between India and UAE. The second one is India and European Union summit that is going to take place on January 27. And then we have an editorial in Indian Express that talks about how tax cuts leave government very little room for welfare spending. And then we'll also understand an editorial from the Indian Express that how US annexation of Greenland could mean for NATO and Russia. Right, so these are the topics. So one by one we'll discuss all these topics in detail. The first one is Prime Minister Narendra Modi met UAE President and defense, LNG, and even further increasing the bilateral trade to reach 200 billion US dollars. So all these things are on table. Now let's understand what is the significance and what is the importance of the UAE President visit to India. Now if you look at India and UAE bilateral relations, now this visit is significant. This visit is significant in the backdrop of the escalating geopolitical tensions in Middle East or a Gulf region. The what geopolitical tensions? We have to know about this. For example, conflicts in Gaza, the Hamas-Israeli conflict, and Yemen there are Houthi militant groups. And then there's an unrest or protest by the civilians in Iran. So all these factors have been highlighting that there has been an escalating geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. Now in this backdrop, the strong cooperation between India and UAE assumes a lot of significance, and it would further strengthen and deepen their comprehensive strategic partnership that these two countries have. Now understand that UAE President, who is Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, so he paid an official visit to New Delhi. And in this official visit, defense, security, LNG, and even further strengthening and increasing bilateral trade to $200 billion is on the table. The objective of this bilateral visit is to further strengthen the strategic defense partnership between India and UAE as well. Now let's one by one understand key outcomes and agreements of this particular visit. Now if we talk about the defense and security as an area of cooperation between India and UAE, both countries have been enjoying strong strategic defense partnership. Now in this backdrop, India and UAE have already signed a letter of intent to work towards a framework agreement, and this framework agreement will help build on a regular bilateral military exercises. So understand that these bilateral military exercises are very important to strengthen interoperability of the two military forces or the two security forces of India and UAE. And there will be a strong defense and industrial cooperation as well. It will help India's aspirations to indigenization of its defense equipment. However, so as India has already signed this framework agreement for further strengthening the strategic defense cooperation, but India in this backdrop has clarified that this partnership is a result of natural evolution of strong bilateral relations between India and UAE. So it is not in response to any specific conflict in the Middle East. it is not in response to any specific recent agreements between Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, between Pakistan or Turkey. So it is not a result of such actions or such specific conflicts. And India also clearly mentioned that it does not imply Indian military involvement in conflicts in the Middle East region. So this framework agreement, it's just simply talking about the regular bilateral military exercises between India and UAE and defense industrial cooperation. So this is going to benefit both India and UAE by further indigenizing their defense equipment and reducing their dependence on other countries to import the defense equipment. Let's look at the trade and economic cooperation front. So understand that UAE is one of the largest trading partners for India. The objective is to further strengthen this bilateral trade. Now understand that in the financial year 24-25, the bilateral trade between India and UAE stands at 100 billion US dollars, which is huge. But through this visit, both India and UAE have decided to double this bilateral trade by 2032. So that means by 2032, India and UAE are going to double the bilateral trade to 200 billion US dollars. So understand, in the year 2022, India and UAE have signed a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. Now, in the spirit of this comprehensive economic partnership agreement, India and UAE will further strengthen the bilateral relationship. So energy cooperation is another very important area. This is important for India's energy security. It is important for India to diversify its import basket or supply sources. Now, in this context, India and UAE have signed a 10-year LNG supply agreement. So this agreement was signed between HPCL, which is Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited, and Abu Dhabi National Oil Company Gas. Now, in fact, this particular agreement between India and UAE will allow the purchase of 0.5 MMPTA LNG by HPCL from the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company Gas. Now, in fact, this agreement is for over the next 10 years and it will start from 2028. So you have to understand the other important dimension of it as well. So as of now, Qatar is India's largest LNG supplier. So after this agreement, UAE becomes India's second largest LNG supplier. So therefore, it will help further strengthening India's energy security in the near term. Civil nuclear cooperation is also another area of strong cooperation between India and UAE. So let's understand how India and UAE will cooperate on this front as well. Now understand that we have several ambitious targets. We could say that the climate commitments, and even India also wanted to become net zero by the year 2070. So primary to become net zero, India also aimed to achieve 100 gigawatt of nuclear energy generation by the year 2047. However, in order to achieve this goal, so recently India has passed the Shanti Act. Shanti Act has been passed. Now Shanti Act will allow the private sector participation into the nuclear energy generation. The Shanti Act actually means sustainable harnessing and advancement of nuclear energy for transforming India. Right? So that is what is a Shanti Act. It will allow, or it will open up nuclear energy generation for the private sector. Now in this context, if you look at India and UAE nuclear energy cooperation, the cooperation will be on small modular reactors. So small modular reactors, so they are very important, and in fact They could generate nuclear energy on a small scale, and they can be established very close to the industrial clusters, so that the energy generated from the small modular reactors can easily be used in those industries. The cooperation will also include nuclear safety, nuclear reactors, operations and maintenance. So everything is part of the civil nuclear cooperation between India and UAE. Let's understand the other important areas of cooperation between India and UAE. So we need to talk about the digital and financial cooperation. Now, digital and financial cooperation is another very important front which is emerging with a huge potential. Particularly, India is a country which is a leader in the digital payments. Why? Because India is the largest digital payments country. I mean, India is a country where large number of digital payments actually takes place. So therefore, there has been a proposal to establish data embassies. The objective of this data embassies is to protect the sovereign data of UAE and India. They even planned to interlink national payment platforms for faster cross-border payments. This is particularly in the context of the diaspora population or Indian workers who are working in UAE. It is going to help them a lot. India has launched several ambitious initiatives. So within the region, beyond the region, for example, the Bharat Mart, Virtual Trade Corridor, Bharat Africa Setu. So UAE has supported all these initiatives. Counter-terrorism is also another very important area of cooperation, and India has been struggling a lot with the cross-border terrorism. So both India and UAE have reaffirmed the commitment to counter cross-border terrorism or terrorism in general. And in fact, they also aimed to achieve the financial security, and in fact they called for a zero tolerance for terrorism, including the cross-border terrorism as well. And they have decided to further strengthen cooperation within the framework of Financial Action Task Force, and this Financial Action Task Force particularly in the area of the counter terror financing or terror financing, countering, and even anti-money laundering. Right, so these are the areas where they have decided to further strengthen their cooperation. Now if you look at this Bharat Africa Setu, the Bharat Africa Setu's objective is to double India Africa trade or further enhance, enrich India Africa trade. Now let's understand the geopolitical backdrop of it. Right, so if you look at the geopolitical backdrop in West Asia, so a geopolitical or it is a volatile region, it is unstable region. West Asia has been facing a lot of issues. For example, growing US Israel Iran tensions, this is an issue. And then Saudi Arabia UAE divergence over the Yemen, this is also another major problem within the Middle East, because in Yemen there is a civil war and there is also a militant group called Houthis. So Houthis and Saudi Arabia, so they have antagonistic relationship. So there is a divergence over the approach between UAE and Saudi Arabia with respect to Yemen. So this is also a geopolitical issue which is existing. And then enhanced Saudi-Pakistan defense cooperation, because they have signed a defense pact in 2025, and then Gaza conflict, US-led peace initiative. So that yesterday we have discussed, which is Board of Peace for Gaza by the US. Now if you look at the significance of UAE President's visit to India, it actually signals that India's strategic autonomy and balanced diplomacy in West Asia. So strategic autonomy as a term which actually means independent foreign policy, right? So independent foreign policy, keeping in mind the core national interests, is strategic autonomy. So India is not part of any blocks, a military bloc, against any other country or any other nation. Rather, India follows a policy of strategic autonomy where it symbolizes an independent foreign policy and balanced diplomacy in West Asia. So that actually reinforces a multi-alignment approach amid rivalries among the Gulf countries. Right? So overall, we could say that this visit is going to further significantly strengthen the defense cooperation, security cooperation, energy security, digital payments, trade between India and UAE. Right. So the next important topic is about India European Union Summit on January 27. Earlier also we have understood that the 77th Republic Day parade that is going to be held in New Delhi. So to this 77th Republic Day ceremony, European Union Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen were invited as chief guests. So we all knew about that. Right. So after this, on January 27, immediately after this, India and European Union are going to conclude the negotiations on a free trade agreement. Understand that the free trade agreement will not yet come into existence, but the negotiations, understand that the negotiations between India and European Union for a free trade agreement was started in the year 2007. Right? So in 2007, the negotiations between India and European Union over a free trade agreement started. However, what happened was in the year 2013, so the negotiations came to a halt because of the differences between India and European Union about this free trade agreement. However, again, the negotiations over free trade agreement resumed in the year 2022 June. So 2022 June, the negotiations over free trade agreement again resumed. Right. So however, it is expected that on January 27, 2026, the negotiations over the free trade agreement between India and European Union would conclude. After the negotiations are concluded, then it will be looked into the legal aspects. That means there will be a comprehensive legal scrutiny will be done on the both sides. Right? So once a comprehensive legal scrutiny is done, then European Union Parliament must ratify it. Parliament must ratify the free trade agreement. So once European Union Parliament ratified this free trade agreement between India and European Union, then the free trade agreement between India and European Union will comes into existence. However, understand it may take some more time. The free trade agreement will not be signed on 27, rather the negotiations for free trade agreement will be concluded on January 27, 2026. So in fact, once this free trade agreement between India and European Union are finalized, then this free trade agreement is called as mother of all free trade agreements, mother of all free trade agreements, because of the potential it actually has. Now in fact, if this free trade agreement is concluded, it will benefit India a lot by further strengthening and enhancing the bilateral trade to European Union. And it is also expected that India might enjoy trade surplus with European Union if this deal has been finalized. So therefore it is very, very important for India. Now, why it is important for India? It is important for India because India export, so boost to exports. Right, so this free trade agreement will give an enormous boost to exports from India to European Union. It will bring in investments. It will also help generate gainful employment opportunities for India's youth. and it will also further strengthen the workforce mobility or labor mobility to European Union countries. So therefore it helps us better utilize our existing demographic dividend. And apart from that, it will also help further strengthen the bilateral relations between India and European Union countries in the backdrop of US imposing 50% tariffs on Indian goods. We all knew that US has imposed 50% tariffs on Indian goods, and it was affected Indian exports to US. So therefore India is looking for alternatives. If this free trade agreement is signed, which is called as mother of all agreements, then it benefits India a lot. Now understand this mobility framework, migrant and mobility framework, is a very important framework for India. As of now, India independently have such a migrant and mobility framework with countries like Germany, France, and Italy within the European Union, right? So it will help mobilization of the skilled workforce from India to European Union. And also understand that both India and European Union further decided to strengthen their security and defense cooperation as well. Security and defense cooperation is another front where these two countries are decided to further strengthen their relationship. So for that, European Union, so what it has been doing, so European Union is going to launch a joint comprehensive strategic vision, right? A joint comprehensive strategic vision program will be launched. So this strategic vision program particularly for 26 to 30, right? So therefore it is going to further strengthen the strategic cooperation, the strategic relationship between India and European Union. And also understand that there are other important areas as well. For example, security and defense partnership. So security and defense partnership between India and European Union. Now the security and defense partnership will further strengthen India and European Union defense and security cooperation as well. However, there are some differences with respect to the comprehensive carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is also known as CBAM, right? So it is carbon border adjustment mechanism. So what exactly is this carbon border adjustment mechanism? So this is a mechanism where Indian exports to European Union, particularly exports from the carbon intensive industries. For example, iron and steel is a carbon intensive industry because this industry generate a lot of carbon emissions. So exports from the carbon intensive industries would face the higher tariffs in the European Union market. Excuse me. So therefore the carbon border adjustment mechanism is one area where there are differences between India and European Union, because understand India is still a developing country. India is still dependent on certain industries which are actually generating a lot of carbon emissions. European Union imposes penalties on Indian exports to European Union, particularly the carbon intensive industries, then it badly affect our exports to European Union. So therefore India has been negotiating with European Union. There are discussions about this carbon border adjustment mechanism that there should be some exemptions provided to India, right? So I hope you have understood this carbon border adjustment mechanism. Now, in this context, if you look into the India-European Free Trade Agreement, so as I have already told you that the negotiations will be concluded by January 27, 2026. Now, in fact, if this agreement is finalized,
this agreement will be called as mother of all agreements because it is the largest of its kind globally, because it will cover trade, investment, mobility, sectoral cooperation between India and European Union. Right. So apart from that, there are several areas which included security, strategic context of this free trade agreement, because the strategic context, the free trade agreement aligns with the broader geopolitical shifts, including the concerns over the supply chain diversification and economic security, keeping in mind both China and US. Secondly, European Union is India's largest trading partner, with bilateral trade reaching 137 billion in 23-24. So therefore, it reflects a 90% growth over a decade. So in fact, the talks between India and European Union actually include the sensitive areas such as tariff on automobiles, alcohol, pharmaceutical, textiles, everything. So these are some sensitive areas, and the talks also, uh, you know, takes into consideration the strategic, these sensitive areas, right? So therefore, these are the crucial aspects with respect to India-European Free Trade Agreement. So let's understand another very important topic, which is talking about tax cuts leave government little room for welfare spending. So this is a very obvious fact. Now, why it is a very obvious fact? Now, recently, in 2019, the government has decided to reduce the corporate tax. Corporate tax cuts were announced by the government. And in the financial year 2025 and 26, the income tax slabs have been rationalized, or income tax has been, you know, uh, you need to earn a higher income to pay income tax, right? So this income tax slab has been increased. So those people who are earning a higher income will pay the income tax. So for example, imagine that earlier those people who are earning about 8 lakh every year, they need to pay income tax. But in 25-26, the government increased this amount to 12 lakh per year. So everybody who is earning around 12 lakh per year, they need to pay income tax, right? So that means, now this is the first measure, this is the second measure, and the third one is recent GST tax slabs rationalization. GST tax slabs rationalization is also another you know attempt to reduce taxes or tax burden on the domestic consumers. So we all knew about that. Now earlier there were five tax slabs within GST, and these five tax slabs were reduced to just two tax slabs. So this is the attempt to rationalize the GST and to boost domestic consumption, right? So because people would have more disposable income with them, and with that disposable income they could boost the domestic consumption and it would fuel economic growth. Now understand, the key concern is that if corporate tax has been reduced by the government, then the companies would pay a lesser amount of tax to the government. And if income tax bracket has been increased from 8 lakh to 12 lakh, then those people who are paying income tax will also get reduced. And if because of the GST tax slabs rationalization, then also a number of areas, either taxes will be zero or taxes will be further reduced on the products. So therefore, with all these things, what will happen? The key concern is that overall tax revenue will come down. Tax revenue will actually come down. Now, in fact, tax revenue is the very important source of money for the government. For example, the government is having the welfare spending obligations, right? So everyone knows about this fact that government spends on welfare programs, whether it is education, healthcare, nutrition, skill development. Right? So these are all welfare programs that government announces and government takes care of these welfare programs every year. From where the government will get the money? The government will get the money from the tax revenue. If tax revenue comes down, don't you think that it affects the welfare spending of the government? Yes, of course. Because imagine that if government is spending rupees 90,000 crore rupees on education, next year the government may reduce this amount to just 75,000 crore alone, because there is a decrease in the tax revenue. There is a decrease in the tax base of the government. And also understand that GDP to tax ratio in India is also not a very high, right? So the GDP to tax ratio is also a very, it is around like 14%, 14.2% GDP to tax ratio in 25-26, right? Therefore, what exactly is this GDP to tax ratio? GDP to tax ratio is actually means, imagine that if government is earning the government's total, I mean India's total GDP is 100 rupees. If India's total GDP is 100 rupees, then the total amount of tax that India has been collecting, it would be around, sorry, it would be around like 14.2 rupees. Right? So this is the tax to GDP ratio. Right? So therefore, if taxes are going down, how the government is going to spend on the welfare program? So that is the key question here. Now, in fact, understand that what will happen if the tax revenue base of government goes down. Tax revenue base of government goes down, then it will affect the welfare spending on one way. Secondly, it will also affect the net devolution of taxes to the state government, right? So net devolution of taxes to the state governments. Because understand that Article 280 of the Indian Constitution provides for establishing finance commission. So that means there shall be a finance commission. So it is constituted by the president once in 5 years. So president will constitute a finance commission every 5 years. Now, what is the objective of the finance commission? The objective of finance commission is to decide the devolution of taxes between the center and state governments. Center and state governments. Understand that central government collect all the direct taxes, or most of the direct taxes, right? So finance commission will decide how the tax amount which is collected by the center should be divided between the center and states. It will be decided by the finance commission under article 280 of the Indian Constitution, right? Now in fact, understand that the the 15th finance commission 15th finance commission has recommended The 15th Finance Commission has recommended that the tax amount should be distributed, that 41% of total tax amount should be distributed to the state governments, and 1% should be distributed to Jammu and Kashmir, and remaining 58% with the center. So this is how the 15th Finance Commission has divided the total 100% tax amount collected by the center. So 58% for the center, 41% for all the states. Now understand, if tax amount collected by the center is going down, that means the overall allocations or overall distribution of tax amount to the states will also comes down. As of now, the state governments have been claiming that they have more responsibilities with lesser funding. Now, earlier state governments used to earn some money through some indirect taxes within the state level, but this GST has been introduced, So GST to a large extent taken away the powers, the taxation powers of the state governments, right? So if this tax base further comes down, then the devolution to the state governments will also goes down, and the welfare spending will also goes down. For example, understand that recently the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act has been changed. It has been restructured into Vikasit Bharat Ji Ramji Act, right? So therefore, as per the revised Manrega scheme, 40 percentage of the total funding must be borne by the state government. So that means state governments are going to have a more burden now, and state governments tax devolutions from the center will also comes down. And also understand that cess and surcharge collected by the center government, and the proceeds or the tax which is actually collected as part of cess and surcharge will not be given to the states. So states will not get the tax proceeds as part of cess and surcharge. So what exactly cess and surcharge? Cess is a tax imposed for a specific purpose. For example, cess can be imposed on education, cess can be imposed on healthcare. So it could be an additional tax on any product. So health cess, education cess. So such cesses can be imposed by the central government. And whatever money collected by the center in cess, it cannot be given to the states. And surcharge is actually tax on tax, right? So it is a tax on tax, and this amount will also be not given to the states. So overall, what it actually means is that the state governments will not have adequate finances to plan welfare in the respective states, and state governments will also start cutting down on funding to various welfare programs implemented at the state level, because if they don't have the finances, how the state governments will launch a new welfare programs, will implement the existing welfare program? So this is the key question here, right? So therefore there is a need to restructure this, there is a need to restructure this, and there is also a need to ensure that there is a regular source of finances for the state governments to carry out the welfare programs at the state government level. So let's understand another very important topic: what US annexation of Greenland could mean to NATO and Russia. So this question is in the backdrop of US President Donald Trump frequently making threats to conquer or capture Greenland, and how it leads to divisions within the NATO, and how it is going to help Russia and China is a key editorial which is given in the Indian Express newspaper. Right? Understand that if tomorrow America takes over Greenland, now in fact it looks as a possibility, because if you look at Donald Trump's statements, it is very obvious that he might capture Greenland very soon. However, it comes at multiple issues, or it will bring in multiple challenges for NATO and West. It may benefit Russia, right? Now, in fact, if US captures Greenland, it would undermine US commitments to sovereignty and international. Because capture of Greenland is not a country. Greenland is a sovereign territory or an autonomous territory within Denmark. Sovereign autonomous territory within Denmark, and Denmark is a NATO member. US is also a NATO member. NATO is a collective security grouping that was established in the year 1949 to protect all the members. For example, if we look at NATO's collective security architecture, NATO believes that an attack on one single country will be considered as the attack on all of us. So that is the collective security architecture that has been established in the year 1949, which is known as NATO. right? So in fact, if US captures Greenland, that means US attacks another country within NATO, right? So therefore, it would easily undermine the international law, sovereignty of Denmark and Greenland, and then it will also create differences within the NATO countries. It will affect NATO unity, and it will also alarm Canada and Europe, because if Greenland is taken over by US, Donald Trump also made remarks that he would take over entire Canada. So therefore, if Donald Trump has taken over Greenland, it would alarm Canada and Europe, and in fact, it would help Russia, right? So within Arctic region and beyond, it is going to help Russia. Also understand that NATO will be at a risk. So understand what exactly is a NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So that was established on 4th April 1949. So through a treaty called Washington Treaty, it was established. So how many members are there? There are total 32 countries. Sweden joined, the latest country to be part of NATO, and the headquarters is located in Brussels, Belgium. The official languages of NATO is English and French. Secretary General Stoltenberg. Right. What is the purpose of NATO? The collective security, collective defense, deterrence. So these are the objectives of NATO. What exactly is the meaning of deterrence? So deterrence means that the collective strength. So they would show the collective strength to the enemy, that we are more powerful now. And if you attack us, then you will face the worst consequences or serious consequences, because we are more strong now, and if you attack us, there will be more serious consequences on you. Now the enemy will think before attacking the NATO countries. Now deterrence as a term is used with respect to this nuclear war. So for example, both India and China are nuclear weapon countries. India would think, China would think uh, before launching a nuclear attack on India. Why? Because India also have a nuclear weapons. If China attacks India, and India will also attack China, so there will be a mutual destruction. So this thinking before they attack, that if we attack India, India will also attack us with the nuclear weapons. So it is better not to attack. It is better to settle this issue diplomatically. This is deterrence, right? So in fact, NATO's credibility is actually rests on Article 5 of this NATO charter. Within this NATO charter, there is Article 5. Now, Article 5 of NATO charter talks about the collective defense, right? So in fact, collective defense in the sense that it assumes the external aggression from any country, not one member violating another's territorial dignity. For example, those countries which are part of NATO, right? So it means that Article 5 has not talking about one NATO country attacking another NATO country, but it is talking about a non-NATO country attacking the NATO country, right? So that is the key defining characteristic of Article 5. However, a US action against Denmark, which administers Greenland, as of now, Greenland is administered by Denmark, because there was an agreement between Denmark and Greenland. Now, Denmark would take over the currency, communication, defense of Greenland, and apart from these three subjects, all other subjects would be governed by Greenland on its own. So, therefore, it is an autonomous territory within Denmark. Right. So, US action against Denmark would create an unprecedented crisis the aliens never designated to handle. So in fact, previously also Denmark made several sacrifices as member of NATO. For example, when US faced 9/11 attacks, terror attacks. US declared global war on terrorism. So Denmark was among the first countries to invoke Article 5, and it stand firmly with the US after this attack. And Danish troops also fought alongside US forces in Afghanistan, suffering heavy losses. However, if US invaded Greenland, US captured Greenland, it would nullify this shared history and hollow out NATO's moral foundation as well. Now, in fact, experts have been of the view that it is a gift to Russia and China if Trump attacks Greenland, because such a move would directly benefit Vladimir Putin, who has long sought to fracture NATO unity and divert Western focus from Ukraine. However, ironically, an action justified as a countering Russian influence in Arctic, because Trump has been claiming that there has been a growing influence of Russia and China in the Arctic region very close to Greenland. So, therefore, this is very important to capture Greenland, and it is a very important for US security. This is what US President Donald Trump has been claiming. But the action from US as countering Russian influence in the Arctic would weaken a very alliance designed to contain Moscow. Right. So, however, strategically the move actually makes no sense. So it makes no sense because US already enjoying extensive rights within Greenland under 1951 treaty, and once US operated 17 bases there, most of which were voluntarily shut down by Washington itself over a period of time. So these facilities could be reactivated without violating their sovereignty. There is no need to capture or take over Greenland. You have extensive rights, use those extensive rights. But the key reason that the geopolitical experts have been giving is that it is not about the national security. It is about the mineral resources in the Arctic region and the Greenland, which actually compelling Trump to capture, Greenland. I hope you have understood this, and that's all for today. And thank you so much. Please subscribe our YouTube channel and like the video.